Hi, I'm Tim Cole, and I wrote this book. In it, I include 10 lessons that we learn from the Wild West that we should apply in order to build a better future for us and our children in the digital age. First, in the stormy days of '68, the slogan we marched under was "Destroy what destroys you." In the light of the excessive power of GAFA, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, it will be important for the future of humanity to rein them in, probably break them up, or even destroy them if they put up too much resistance. In the cases of Google and its parent company Alphabet, as well as Facebook, the historic precedents are crystal clear. Standard Oil and AT&T needed to be dismantled like pruning back an apple tree. This will result in dozens of independent companies, each dealing with a different aspect of technology, each presumably capable of holding its own in a competitive market without needing to hold on to the apron strings of a giant corporate parent. Second, the World Wide Web and its major players need adult supervision. There are enough suggestions making the rounds, from digital rights boards to describing a kind of quality label issued preferably by a private-public partnership. One such example could be TÜV in Germany, which for the past 100 years has been tasked with certifying the roadworthiness of cars and trucks. Victor Meyer-Schönberg, an Austrian-born legalist and the head of the Oxford Internet Institute, has called for mandatory data exchange, which would kick in at a market share of about 10%. Above that, tech companies should be forced to share data they have harvested from consumers with others, especially smaller companies, to create a level playing field and avoid stifling innovation. Third, society needs rule of law to function properly. It was no different in the days of the Wild Wild West than it is today. And the laws are the responsibility of governments. However, we also need social rules and principles that help us maintain civility and fairness among ourselves, without the need for any higher authority. In the early days of the internet, we, as users, made our own rules and called it netiquette. Today, the call for a kind of digital common sense is gaining, and we are summoned to put it into practice. We will need to establish a new set of moral and ethical guidelines that can help us shape the digital future so that the result will be the kind of world we all want to live in. We need to communicate these digital ethics aggressively within our communities, in schools and universities, in training facilities, and above all, within our companies. I agree here with Janina Lowe, a young philosophy professor in Vienna, who says that every large company should have an ethics officer, similar to the privacy offer required by law in many countries, at least here in Europe. 4. Laws are only as good as the politicians who make them. That was no different back in the Wild West than it is today. Yes, a civilized nation needs laws, but it also needs politicians who know what the hell they're about. The internet needs regulation for sure, but that will require skill and tact, as well as the ability to proceed sensitively without falling into the trap of heavy-handed state supervision. If in doubt, the course to follow will be self-regulation and relying on the power of the free market to correct its own abuses. It took time to rein in the mighty robber barons of the Gilded Age at the end of the 19th century, so the race we face will be a marathon and not a sprint. Forcing the modern robber barons to abandon their pernicious ways and behave responsibly will be a long haul, and regulation is only part of the solution. So politicians, please proceed with caution and finesse, with only as much regulation as necessary and as little as possible. 6. Just as the Sherman Antitrust Act took years before it was seriously applied to bust the trusts, we need to reckon with a long delay before the necessary measures adopted today or in the near future will lead to lasting effects on data monopolies and data misuse by the big tech companies. All the more important for us to take steps now. 7th, In life, you have to do two things: die and pay taxes. That is, unless you're an internet company like Amazon or Apple, then you can construct complicated tax shelters abroad and park your money there to avoid paying your dues back home. These companies have stashed away billions which could have been used to create jobs, repair America's crumbling infrastructure, provide universal health care, and in short, patch up the rifts in American society that are very apparent today. We must end the practice of only taxing tech companies locally. Instead, they must be forced to pay their fair share to the societies around the world in which they do business and reap gross profits. 8. And while we're about it, what about the owners of the data these companies use to grow fat at our expense? In a certain sense, we all work for Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple by contributing details and highly personal information about ourselves for them to monetize. So why don't we have a say, a kind of a digital workers' council? And why don't we get our just reward at the end of the year like an employee payout? Of course, big tech won't volunteer to do this, so we need to put on pressure. The best way to achieve leverage would be solidarity. Why don't we join together and create user unions at Google, Facebook, and the others? 9. And what if they refuse? Then maybe we will eventually have to take to the streets to demand our rights. Mass demonstrations work, as the example of those against ACTA, SOPA, and PIPA proved back in 2012 when the internet went on strike, and all three copyright infringement acts attempting to oppose censorship through obsolete ideas about copyright were derailed by public protests. We netizens are more powerful than we think, and we will need to flex our muscles. Finally, 10. This struggle must result in a rethinking of our social norms and values. Greed is cool is not the slogan we need to create growth and prosperity for all. Our forefathers in the Gilded Age fought for social and economic justice and managed to drag the robber barons kicking and screaming into the progressive era. And like them, we need to persuade and, if necessary, force GAFA to help us create an age of justice and humanity. Yes, this sounds starry-eyed, and society seems to be drifting in the opposite direction right now. That is what we must have felt like to folks back in the days of the Wild West, too. They have a lot to tell us. We should listen.